New York, the people of the great state of New York versus Donald J. Trump is right now entering a brand new chapter. The prosecution has rested its case, and Team Trump has started its defense. On the stand right now, attorney Robert Costello, who, according to Michael Cohen, formed a back channel to Donald Trump himself in the year 2018. That's when Michael Cohen was the target of a federal criminal investigation. Costello claiming that Michael Cohen told him Trump did not know about the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Cohen has testified on direct that he was still in protect Trump mode at the time, that he didn't tell Costello. The prosecution rested its case, though, just in the last hour after methodically, brick by brick, restating the elements of their criminal case against the ex-president. They sought to clean up some of the damage done by Trump defense attorney Todd Blanche with an assist from their star witness, Trump's ex-attorney, Michael Cohen. Prosecutor Susan Hoffinger bringing the case back to its basics. As the New York Times reports, quote, "Are you actually on trial here in this case?" Hoffinger asked Michael Cohen. "No," he said. Through her questions, Hoffinger made an obvious point, that the defense was seeking to make Michael Cohen look like a criminal. But ultimately, the jurors aren't here to judge Cohen's criminality. They're here to judge Trump. Hoffinger also reminding the jury that Michael Cohen already pleaded guilty to the very crime that Donald Trump is accused of trying to cover up: campaign finance violations for the payments to Stormy Daniels. And prosecutors, after a lengthy and tense back and forth with the defense, entered into evidence this photo. It's from C-SPAN's archives. It's actually a screenshot from October 24th, 2016, around 7:57 p.m. that day. It shows Donald Trump with his bodyguard Keith Schiller. Now, why does it matter? Well, the photo shows the two men together, suggesting that Michael Cohen could have talked to Trump about Stormy Daniels, and he could have talked to Keith Schiller, too. It undermines Blanche's big, whatever you want to call it, grand slam aha moment from last week when he suggested that Michael Cohen wasn't telling the truth about the substance of his call on the 24th with Trump. That blow coming after a long cross-examination, none of it really significantly chipping away at the mountain of black and white documentary evidence or circumstantial evidence that prosecutors have already entered into the record in this case. In fact, NBC News is reporting that Blanche did not even bring up the 2017 Oval Office meeting where Trump reiterates that Michael Cohen would be reimbursed for the hush money payments he made to porn star Stormy Daniels. There were also signs throughout the cross-examination that Blanche's swipes didn't exactly land in the eyes of the jury that he needs to convince. During cross-examination, NBC News reports this from the courtroom, quote, "The jury is having a tough time. Jurors are rubbing their eyes, holding their head in hands, and shifting in seats," end quote. A day in which the Trump trial returned to focus on a potentially damning set of facts for the ex-president is where we begin today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. With us at the table for the hour once again, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's back with us. New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig is back with us. Donnie Deutsch also back with us, the host of the podcast On Brand. Let's start, though, as we always do, with my friend and colleague, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, outside the courthouse for us. Vaughn, this is a day, I think, widely anticipated is a fair way to describe it. I think a lot of people wanted to see how Michael Cohen would be, and I think a lot of people were interested in how the prosecution would clean up, if that's the right term to use, from any damage to his credibility that Todd Blanche did last week. With those sort of metrics and any others that you were looking for as the day began, tell me how today has gone.
Right, Nicole. After 15 days of the prosecution presenting its case to the jury, 4 of those with Michael Cohen directly testifying about the years of experience that led him to ultimately flip on Donald Trump and come to this courthouse and testify what he says was the truth about his negotiations with David Pecker in August of 2015 to have this catch and kill scheme be ultimately executed, then have Stormy Daniels paid off in the weeks before the 2016 election, and then ultimately go to the Oval Office in February of 2017 and work through that reimbursement plan of 11 different checks for $35,000. Michael Cohen left the stand here today presenting hours of testimony to this jury. And there were questions under redirect in which you noted the attempts to clean up some of the questions that, under cross-examination, Donald Trump's defense team may have left with the jury. And it was particularly that October 24th phone call where that clip, that photo of Keith Schiller, the bodyguard, standing next to Donald Trump at the end of a Tampa Bay campaign rally at 7:57 p.m. You see the two men walk off stage. At 8:02 p.m., that is when phone records show that a 90-second phone conversation took place between Keith Schiller and Michael Cohen. And when the prosecution asked Michael Cohen if, in that phone call, he talked to Donald Trump about the Stormy Daniels payment, he said yes, he in fact did. Under cross-examination, the defense team also tried to call into question phone calls that happened on the morning of October 26, suggesting that Michael Cohen had concern about an extortion campaign related to Tiffany Trump. But he testified here in front of this jury that he, in fact, in those phone calls with Donald Trump, did talk about the Stormy Daniels payment. And a new number that Michael Cohen presented to this jury was the fact that in October of 2016, it wasn't just two phone calls on the morning of October 26th or one phone call on the evening of October 24th, but it was, quote, more than 20 times he had conversations with Donald Trump about the Stormy Daniels payment. Those were the words from Michael Cohen to this jury to wrap up the 15 days of the prosecution's case in order to make Donald Trump ultimately guilty of these 34 felony counts.
So here's what Vaughn is talking about. Here's that testimony, Andrew. You testified that you believe you talked to both Keith Schiller and Donald Trump on that call. Do you recall that? Answer, yes, I do. Question, during that time period, did you have a number of conversations with Mr. Trump about resolving the Stormy Daniels matter? Answer, yes. Were some of those conversations in person? Yes. Were some of them by phone? Yes. Were some of them longer? Yes. Were some of them shorter? Yes. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss at this point. Approximately how many conversations did you have with Mr. Trump about the Stormy Daniels matter during that time? To Vaughn's point, answer, quote, more than 20. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that their strategy was to take, you know, a speck of dust on a pile of you know, cow poop and say, well, the speck may or may not have been there. It's still a massive amount of stuff into the record that isn't even being disputed.
So that is, you know, welcome to defense lawyer.
You should welcome Todd Blanche.
And I really actually don't mean that pejoratively. You know, you're dealt a hand and you play it. And what you want to do is say, look, I found this. Here's a discrepancy, and then even if the witness made a mistake, you don't say it's a mistake, you say it's a lie, because that's so subjective as to whether it was intentional or not. So and then you want to then blow that up and say, you know, if that happened here, it happened 20 times. Of course, they don't have the proof of that. They only have the proof of the one. And that is what defense lawyering is. And obviously it's so interesting because Michael Cohen, going into this, is a difficult witness for the prosecution because he obviously has a lot of baggage. So that's clear. But I have to say, I think Susan Hoffinger, really shown on, and you can see her experience. You know, she is a very experienced defense lawyer as well as a prosecutor, and I think that helps. And I think the biggest star of who did really well is Michael Cohen. All of this sort of concern about, was he going to be volatile? Was he going to fight needlessly?
Yeah.
Maybe little pieces, but in general, I think the prosecution has to think, and I'm sure his counsel thinks, he really held up. And you know what? This is a guy who, like, of course he's there because of his own choices in life, but he has been through a lot. And you know what? Having the whole world focusing on you and the entire Trump machine focused on you as well to dig up every speck of dirt. It's going on right now as we speak.
Yeah.
That's difficult. And I have to say, I was surprised
that he held up.
Yeah, so well.
What I think is interesting, I keep going back to David Kelly's interviews on this program to it's disorienting, right? Because I'm watching the way I would watch a television show, right? Trump has always succeeded in making his sordid criminal life, like a TV show. And I'm thinking, wow, they really landed some blows on him. But what are the blows? That he committed crimes? He committed the same crimes Trump's on trial for. I mean, this is about whether or not the jury can become convinced of the evidence that the Southern District of New York was convinced of when they named Trump Individual 1, the unindicted co-conspirator. So it seems that whether or not Cohen committed a crime isn't the question. Is it simply a defense strategy to try to change the question?
Well, this is why, I think if you're the prosecution, and certainly when I was a prosecutor, I wanted a really smart jury. Because a lot of what happens on the defense side, and again, I don't say this pejoratively, is theater. And the more you can say, look at the birdie, look over here, the better. And that's why, when I've been talking to you about this and you're like, well, couldn't they just focus the jury on, like, think of all the evidence you knew even before he took the stand. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that is one of the things you're going to hear. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, so much of what Michael Cohen said is corroborated, and you kind of knew what the story was beforehand.
And the jury will decide if that was enough, right? We have no idea.
Exactly.